And we're back.
And we're back, and welcome to this is the second round of the altar.
So we are connected this time. We're going.
We are connected this time. We're
Now
live.
we're for real.
Yeah, we started 2 minutes, like 2 minutes early, talking. I'm like, oh yeah, I never hit go live because I'm a jackass. Anyways, welcome to the latest episode of the altar. Yeah, the Mexicans are at it again. We got me, we got Ben, we've got Yimra, and we've got the Cybersmith.
Dude.
How you doing? You have anyone to activate? You gotta do it again. Because I ruined.
No, we can put that one in the outtakes.
Yeah. No, Charles is reactivated. So, yeah. So now I already got the technical fuck ups on my end. Why is it always gotta be me? You know, like I'm always fucking up something randomly.
There's always one of us.
Yeah, I shouldn't have been in charge of any of this today. So, anyways, so what we do normally with like the first time you're on is because as you said, you are a libertarian with a couple extra labels to it, and being from the UK, just give us a quick, couple minutes if you want of how you became a libertarian.
Well, I'd say it started happening when I started studying economic theory back in high school, and it very quickly becomes apparent when you look at the historical record that the libertarians are right when it comes to economics. The less you regulate an economy, the more prosperous it will be. That's not to say that necessarily means it is always wise to deregulate an economy, because economic prosperity isn't the only meaningful metric that a society should look at. A great example of this is, I think the clearest example of this is what happens when one society is interacting with another society that doesn't adhere to free market principles. Take the PRC, the Red China. So, Red China operates what basically anyone who follows a philosophy would consider to be unethical practices. So, I would actually say there is a case to be made on regulating trade with Red China. I think we are far too dependent on them, and that essentially means we have, to some extent, subsidized their unethical practices. Now, I recognize in a strictly libertarian perspective, we shouldn't be regulating trade. It will be worse for our economy. But are there things that it is worth worsening our economy for? And that's when we start having serious conversations. So I'll talk to leftists who will admit that, yes, if we regulate the economy will do worse, but that is worth it for X, Y, Z reason. There are traditional right-wingers who would say that. There are left-wingers who would admit that. Reasonable conversations can be had with that. But I think you have to acknowledge that once you start to regulate, you will get worse economic outcomes. So libertarianism on a social perspective, that came later, more as I started to study the philosophy of the Enlightenment, John Locke, Thomas Paine, the principles of natural rights, and what we might call the voluntarist philosophy. I would say libertarianism is the more ethical way to organize societies internally, and frankly, with the best will of the world, even if it were not strictly the most moral way, we come to C.S. Lewis's problem. There are so few men fit to be rulers. Even if we were to say, okay, there is a more ethical way to organize society than giving people the freedom to conduct their own affairs as they wish, every other way of implementing society requires rulers who have a level of benevolence, consistency, and foresight that is simply extraordinarily rare. So I would say it is probably the most moral way of running society, and it is definitely the most practical way of running society internally. That said, there are a few issues where I would likely disagree with quite a few American libertarians in particular.
Okay, well, just wanted how you got there, and we're gonna get to that because I'm sure there's plenty. I mean, because when you and me did the
I went off on a tangent. Yes, sorry.
Oh yeah, dude, you're fine.
Worries.
Don't worry about it. Because when we're doing the sound tests, like check like that, like because I don't think you're familiar with our political ideologies, and I'm like, yeah, you pick our brain. We'll get into that. I just want to get to what everyone's probably tuning in for. is the human pet post. So,
That.
and then so get that we're gonna get that out of the way, right off the bat, and then people can.
2018, 2017.
Was it 2018?
It was.
I want to say it was. I thought it was before Trump, but I don't even fucking know anymore.
It was before I could legally drink. I'll say that much.
It definitely was before. Gosh, it actually must have been back in 2016.
I don't know. And before I continue down this line with this, was that a serious post?
It was a serious post, but it's been taken so far out of context that most people don't understand what it was trying to convey.
I would like to comment real quick. I believe it is the most important thought experiment of our time, and I do mean that.
Well, because I've got the I'm gonna wipe away that notification there because I've got the a whole chain with uncle, father, or whatever. But I'm just gonna get to the meat, and you can give me the context. I'm just gonna read the part that everyone remembers, and not the context and everything. We'll have you clear that up. So the post in question, you're like, okay, just please consider the following scenario. It's 5 to 10 years from now, which it's 5 years about from the original post, mind you. You're sitting, so you're sitting in a restaurant enjoying a lovely meal when I walk in, accompanied by my wife, my children, and my human pet, whose genitals are covered as it enters on all fours and is wearing underpants. If my family and I then make an order of our own at the table next to you, in what way have we infringed upon your freedom? And I think I'm getting the context of reading this right now. But that was off topic. So, what rational basis do you have to demand that we leave our beloved pet at home? Heck at all. I like that you censored heck, which is it's adorable. I don't know why you did that, but let's consider a more extreme scenario. It's 5 to 10 years from now. You're sitting in a restaurant enjoying a lovely meal when I walk in without my wife and children for whatever reason they haven't accompanied me. With my surgically modified human pet, wearing a collar, being led in by its leash. My pet has been spayed and neutered, though you can't tell because its genitals, along with its boobies, if it's a female, have been covered up. It has no vocal cords. It walks on all fours, not by choice, but because its toes have been removed, along with the tendons in its ankles being severed. It may have had its thumbs and the last 2 segments of each finger amputated, making it easier to care for. No fingernails to trim. Perhaps I've even humanely removed its eyes, making it less independent. Even in this scenario, I haven't infringed upon your liberties. And then irrationally prejudiced is precisely what you are. So contextually, it was just like I could do whatever I want with a contract with somebody else, and it doesn't infringe on your liberties. Is basically the message I was getting from that, using the most extreme scenario.
That's perhaps the more general sense. Firstly, thank you for correcting my grammar there. I believe I said "or" instead of "our."
Yeah. Yes.
It was far too late to correct it by the time I noticed that. But yes, you have to understand the initial context is followed on from several early conversations I've had with people in that thread. Most of whom I think are long gone or are under different names by now. Uncle Father, I think, is still around, but generally the conversation had been around this case in 2016 of, I think it was a for-hire dominatrix had walked a man through a shopping centre, one of those big American-style shopping malls that have all the different types of shop. There are a few of them in the UK, but you Yankees love the things. I think there's a film about zombies set in one. I think there's multiple films about zombies set in one.
Yeah, there's a Romeo film that has that.
Yeah, I think there's a Zack Snyder one too. But yes, point being, that was what spawned it off. And there had been previous conversations where we had essentially come to loggerheads where I was saying, you can't make this behavior illegal. After all, everyone here was fully clothed. There's no consistent law you could make that would criminalize this that couldn't be interpreted as criminalizing things that you also disapprove of, because your entire argument against it and the arguments that have been made against it, and this is in previous discussions to the one that was screenshotted, was that it made you uncomfortable, and that isn't a basis for legislation. There's no consistent standard there. So what I was then going on to in the increasingly extreme examples was saying, okay, I challenge you to make a law that would specifically make this illegal, but wouldn't make anything you approve of illegal. And I also, to some extent, brought in arguments for saying, because nothing there does not have an analog in the way we treat pets. You know, pets are routinely desexed. There's ear cropping, tail docking. Pets are often bred to have substandard vision or hearing. Nothing I would say that we do there is if you look at what declawing a cat actually entails, it is precisely that. It is the removal of the last digit on what is analogous to a finger in a cat's skeletal structure. So nothing I said there was out of the ordinary for what people do to pets regularly and legally. So, which I think we can have a conversation about whether people should be allowed to do that. There is an interesting conversation to be had within the libertarian perspective on what moral obligations people have towards non-agents. So ethical treatment of animals, for example. But that being a separate discussion, the issue, what I was trying to point out to these people was you can't criminalize behavior just because it makes you uncomfortable. You have to have an actual consistent standard. And of course, they all took it completely the wrong way and did the equivalent of saying, oh, that Schrodinger, he's a monster. He's poisoning his cats. He must be locked up. So it was a thought experiment designed to indicate the fact that you couldn't actually criminalize these under anything but the most vague laws on the basis of it makes me uncomfortable, which is not a good standard to make a law.
Yeah. Well, are you sure you're not an anarcho-capitalist there, guy?
I have a lot of sympathy for anarcho-capitalism. I just do have I do have questions about how exactly that would work with regards to how, for example, mob justice. And of course, societies that aren't anarcho-capitalist do sometimes fall prey to mob justice, but I think you would need something akin to an independent court system to prevent this kind of runaway mob justice, to ensure that there are standards of evidence.
Oh, there's private law in anarcho-capitalism.
Well, I'm not saying that the court system couldn't privatize itself to some extent. Sure, you could have private bailiffs. The guy who makes the gavel can be privately hired. That's fine. But I think you do need some standard of evidence, some burden of proof. So here's a question: how does anarcho-capitalism enforce double jeopardy rules? How do we maintain double jeopardy under anarcho-capitalism? And I think that's an important principle, the principle of double jeopardy. I don't see how you would actually implement and enforce double jeopardy under anarcho-capitalism, but I do think it's an important principle to have in our legal system.
That's interesting. That's actually because I've never thought about that before with anarcho-capitalism because yeah, now I have. Now, because that'll be something right off the bat I can tell you, I do not know. I can safely say that. I can speculate is how it would be. Because, well, I can be right off the cuff, I guess. I can try to do this. Well, because, how first question, I say, in the current system, how often does double jeopardy happen?
Never. That's the point of it.
No. I mean, how many times has there ever been a chance like like O.J. Simpson? Actually, I was just listening about that today. That he couldn't be tried again at on the government level,
and in the criminal court,
that's an interesting question, and I actually think that is an absolutely classic case of where, absolutely horrible people do have to be protected by the law, because the alternative is a situation in which none of us are safe. And what happened in the original O.J. Simpson case? He was misled by the prosecutors into believing that what he was saying was immune to prosecution, that he couldn't be prosecuted. Essentially, he was, and whether they did this deliberately or an accident, he was misled into waiving his Fifth Amendment rights. And he did so under false pretenses. Now, whether or not they lied to him or whether it was an honest mistake, I don't know, can't comment. They may have done it deliberately, they may have done it accidentally. But in either case, this man waived his Fifth Amendment protections, the right to not self-incriminate if you don't want to, not to give testimony against yourself, which is an essential component of free speech. The freedom to speak is also the freedom to not speak. O.J. Simpson was essentially misled into giving testimony against himself under the sincere belief that he was immune to prosecution. Now, yeah, the man was horrible. You shouldn't be having sex with people who you know are under the influence of quaaludes, even, perhaps, especially if you were the one who administered those quaaludes. But the principle of double jeopardy is that you cannot then retry him, and you cannot convict him on the basis of testimony that he gave under a false waiving of his Fifth Amendment rights, because under those policies, Fifth Amendment rights essentially don't matter. If you let that precedent stand, any prosecutor could say to any defendant, don't worry, nothing you say can be held against you. We are giving you immunity. And that is something prosecutors have the authority to do. What they don't have the authority to do is lie about giving that. And what's allowing Bill Cosby's prosecution to stand would mean, what allowing his conviction to stand would mean, was that any prosecutor could lie about giving someone.
All right, so we just went from double jeopardy to giving false immunity deals. Well, the DA.
Well, the double jeopardy comes in because they cannot now retry him without that. And the reason they can't retry him, all the evidence is tainted. The jury would know things that they have no business knowing because they only know them due to a violation of Fifth Amendment rights. Double jeopardy comes in, the only place double jeopardy comes in is stopping you from being retried. If you're acquitted, you cannot be retried. Once you are deemed not guilty, you cannot then be charged again for the same crime. This is essential because it prevents the state from just hounding people and saying,
you can't be retried.
Well, we're just going to keep redoing it. Essentially doing what the European Union used to want to do with referendums. Oh, you decided to vote to leave? Well, let's have another referendum and another referendum until you do it our way.
Haven't they done that like a shitload of times?
Nice.
Yes, to other countries they have. We managed to get out of that, so I can just say, no, we had a referendum.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you. But that principle is essential. If you don't have double jeopardy, then the court can just keep retrying and retrying until they get it right. This is also one of the reasons I'm against the death penalty, because there's not much help to. Whoops! Turns out that there was a witness lied. Turns out we misinterpreted evidence. Turns out that something was omitted from discovery that shouldn't have been omitted. But we've already chopped the person's head off now. So this is a reason I'm against the death penalty. It is far too easily abused. So I think those principles are essential. And even though they do, and we must acknowledge this, they do sometimes allow bad people to get away with bad behavior. Bill Cosby being a classic. No, not Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby.
I want to go back to O.J. Simpson. I want to go back to O.J. Simpson because he couldn't be retried by the government, but the civil court he was retried and he was found guilty and he had to pay out some amount of money.
Absolutely, and of course, civil courts are practically a staple of any anarcho-capitalist system. They are how you handle conflict resolution. Until we
basically for the double jeopardy thing. Stage. Yeah. How me thinking about it with anarcho-capitalism is because right now, when someone's tried. It's not for the victim's benefit. I mean, jail time, yeah, like for the O.J. Simpson, like it would have been like, oh yeah, he would have went to jail, but what would the family have gotten for it if he'd actually gotten convicted? In anarcho-capitalism, it's not the state versus O.J. Simpson. It would be, the people, like the whatever her family was. I don't know their names. The typical white names probably. Would it be them going towards him?
What happens if I murder an orphan?
Who's going to
be prosecuted? Okay, so under the anarcho-capitalist system, what happens if I kill an orphan?
The rights enforcement agency, because they don't want someone going around killing people in their neighborhood, because there's rights enforcement agencies in anarcho-capitalism, right? Like basically small overlapping governments, overlapping legal systems, and so if there was an orphan, for example, because this actually has been brought up before, is that it's in the best interest of the rights enforcement agency not to have like a fucking killer walking around. So if there's no one to charge them, they will take that as a goodwill thing for everyone else because they're like, oh, we're not going to pay you if you don't do anything about this in that sort of regard.
That's that's a reasonable system. So the trial occurs. The rights enforcement agency is essentially acting as the prosecution, or at least the opposing party to the defendant.
Basically, on behalf of the community, essentially, I would say.
Effectively, yes, acting as advocates for the common good, if you will.
Mm.
And they fail to convince the jury. The murderer, the alleged murderer, is released. Now, under the principle of double jeopardy, which I maintain is essential to having a free society, in our current system of non-anarcho-capitalism, which doesn't operate under anarcho-capitalism, you cannot retry that person for that specific offence. Once you are acquitted, you cannot be retried for that specific offence. I believe that is an essential principle to having a free society.
Yeah.
How, under anarcho-capitalism, do we maintain that same liberty? How do we prevent them from being treated again?
I would just assume, because again, this is all speculation, because obviously anarcho-capitalism hasn't been tried. I would just assume that if it came down to it, the judge declared like, yeah, you know what, there's not enough evidence to convict. That's it. That's the end of that, essentially, because there's no point in retrying them with the same evidence if it already in an unbiased court system, right? To do that, Ben's got something.
The key element as well. Ben?
So one of the big things in an anarcho-capitalist society is that if you do have an arbitration system, for the most part, it's just going to be the equivalent of a civil court or a civil trial in what we have today. There's not going to be, like you brought up with the orphans, they're not going to be like state versus whatever, or like in the event of an orphan, a family versus whatever. It's going to be some party, be it a rights arbitration authority that is bringing the suit on behalf of the orphan, or worst case scenario, let's say there's nobody. After all of that, outside of the court system, what you still have is the system of voluntary interactions between parties. So let's say... No, go ahead.
But we do still have the system of R. Kelly, another great example. The system of voluntary interactions is that all of the people who used to release his music have now said, we will not engage in any contract that enriches R. Kelly. We'll release his music and donate the proceeds to charity if he's okay with that. We'll release his music for free if he's okay with that. But we will no longer in any way be willing to enrich him. So anarcho-capitalism is not a prerequisite of using voluntary association as a deterrent to criminal behavior. We can already do that right now. And in fact, we do that, and you could argue we maybe do that too much. It is very difficult to get a job with any kind of criminal record nowadays. Perhaps too much so, to the extent that people are being negatively impacted for things they may have done years ago, possibly when they were very different people or in a very different state of mind. But we do have that system. Anarcho-capitalism is not a prerequisite for the use of voluntary association as a deterrent to criminal behavior.
That is very true. However, I would want to address one thing with the criminal record. Assuming in an anarcho-capitalist society, all you have is a civil court, you wouldn't necessarily have an honest, criminal record. And the understanding people have with civil court is that it's a much lower bar than what you would have in a criminal court. For example,
the bar for evidence is just preponderance in a civil court. You just have to be more likely than not. And that, incidentally, is one of the reasons that O.J. Simpson... everyone is getting mixed up in my head. That is one of the reasons that Bill Cosby was prosecuted civilly but not criminally. And this happens in many, many criminal cases. The bar for evidence is not enough to prosecute criminally, but there is enough evidence for a civil suit. A very famous case of this is that under the United States federal government was sued for, I believe it was criminal negligence in the death of the preacher Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Essentially, they knew someone was trying to kill him, but they didn't warn him about it. And there's a possibility that if he'd been warned, he might have worn body armor, he might have used one of those big glass shields that the Pope uses, or he might have just had his speech in a different place. So because they had a duty of care, essentially, and they violated it by not telling him what they knew, they committed negligence in his death, and they were sued, I believe, by his estate for that, and they were found in a civil court. There was enough evidence to find them guilty of wrongdoing in a civil court. There was not enough evidence to meet the threshold in a criminal court. That's possibly one of the biggest cases of someone committing an act of major negligence and not sharing information that they had reason to believe might have saved a person's life. And that's just
People that Yimmer, like, dude, you okay?
Been drinking so much absinthe. It is almost pure alcohol.
All right,
it is
so
90%.
I've got the assumed answer. The more so is that with the rights enforcement agencies, right? Because like the double jeopardy thing, we're taking up like way too much time with. So I'm just going to give you this. If you don't like it, fine, whatever. But with the let's say O.J. Simpson's rights enforcement agency, when they're going to find the court that's going to try him, a part of the deal is if he's found not guilty, they cannot retry him, like in a contract-based type deal, and that's it. That's all you got to make sure of, which is more because anarcho-capitalism is more contract-based. So the judge would respect that, and that'd probably be like a basic contract going to court.
That's fair. The one difference is under our current system, you have mutually exclusive jurisdictions, and each court under our current system of government has a monopoly. Only the Edinburgh Sheriff's Court can try crimes in Edinburgh. Only the magistrates' courts of England and Wales can try crimes in their respective boroughs and counties. In an anarcho-capitalist system, as I understand it, one of the great advantages of this system, and it is an advantage, is competing systems. You don't like the people who make your roads, you can go to another road provider. You don't like the people who make your water, you can go to another water provider. But there's no monopolies. I don't see how you can have double jeopardy if there are multiple competing prosecutors, because you made a contract with that one prosecutor, but you didn't make a contract with any other prosecutors.
That's the thing. They would respect the contract. Like that's where it dies right there. Can't be tried anywhere else contractually wise. And you would your rights enforcement agency would let anyone else know if they were attempting to try you again, OJ again, for example. We'd be like, we've already dealt with this. Here's the contract. We'll email it over or fax, because Americans still fax people all the time, which is a weird thing.
Doesn't that violate the principle of voluntarism? Two people making a contract between them cannot bind a third party, nor can two bodies of people making a contract between them bind a third
it's basically in my mind. Granted, this is all speculative because we have not had anarcho-capitalism. I don't know what else I can say because I don't know.
Hong Kong came quite close to anarcho-capitalism at a point in its history. It didn't get all the way there, but it came quite close to it. But the one institution that was still exempt from that, the one institution that was still able to maintain a monopoly was the court system. And I think there is a serious issue. If the court cannot have a monopoly, certain legal principles become impossible to maintain. And that is one worry I have.
I just don't see. I just don't see in a anarcho-capitalist society how some rights enforcement agencies and courts outside of the network would even they don't even have the authority to try you because you're outside their network essentially. But that's just my
multiple networks can overlap in a given area. You have a choice of different ones.
It would be what's the shit of repeat dealings. I think David Friedman talked about this. Is that basically they would already have agreed to not, because you already agreed on one court to look into, like, to try this matter, and that everyone else would respect that in that area because there's already a court, because you would shop the court to go to in the first place. And the two rights enforcement agencies of the victim and the suspect would have agreed on a judge, and then the other ones would be like, okay, of the network in the area would be like, okay, that's fine, you guys do that, and that's done. It's just how in my mind that's how it works, at least. But then again, some could. That's why I want anarcho-capitalism, but it's going to be 1,000 years before we get it. But that's my best idea of that. So you don't have to agree. But that's just how that's That's just how I see it in my mind.
The workability of that is debatable, but I do think it's, at the very least, it's very hard to maintain these principles without courts that are monopolistic within a jurisdiction. But fair enough. You wanted to discuss issues in which I think I might disagree with not just anarcho-capitalists but American libertarians.
Oh yeah, I wanted to get because that was actually basically, how is it being a libertarian in the UK?
Okay, well, one thing is I'm a libertarian monarchist, and a lot of we are a monarchist country, and most people here, despite what the Illuminati Jacobins of the Labour Party would have you believe, most people do still appreciate the royal family. And this is an area in which I might disagree with American minarchists and libertarians. So, of course, under an anarcho-capitalist system, you don't really have a head of state because there is no state to be head of. But against libertarians and minarchists, I would argue that a hereditary rulership, or perhaps something more akin to the Holy Roman Emperor, or the system which I believe they have currently in Malaysia of elective monarchy, that might work as well. I believe that system offers a number of advantages. For one thing, you don't constantly have rulers who are chasing current trends. You don't have the weather vane effect. And the weather vane effect is, I think, of your past of your past 5 presidents, only one of them has actually been consistent on the issue of homosexual marriage, and that's Donald Trump. He's always been in favor of it, as I understand it. Everyone else just changed their position when it became popular to do so.
Yes, so politically convenient is what we say.
So that is an issue
in the 90s being pro-gay, fucking king.
Having leaders who have to campaign for popular vote. That is one issue. There's the constant chasing of approval and the accordant shifting of positions. There's also the issue of foresight, or perhaps more taking the long-term view. Are you familiar with the idea of time preference, that different people in different systems value immediacy more or less than others? I find that the time preference of monarchic and aristocratic societies tends to be quite different to those of republican and elected societies. Where power is elected, there is very little thought for what will happen in the long term, because it won't be your problem in the long term, particularly with term limits. There's a rather cynical attitude that says no elected official has a vested interest in caring about what happens after both of his or her terms are up. And when there's a strict limit on how many terms you can have, as with the American presidency, there is a case to say that Joe Biden has absolutely no reason to care what happens to the country in 6 years' time.
He doesn't even know what's going on right now.
It's elder abuse.
Were he not decaying in the mind, he would have no reason to care what happens in 6 years. He's not going to run again if he loses in 20. He's not going to run again if he loses in 2024. So even if he wins, he will then be out in 2028. He has no incentive to care about what happens to the country after that. It won't concern him. Now, compare that to, say, our Queen. She knows that whatever state she leaves the country in, when hopefully many, many years from now she passes, she will.
God save the Queen.
Indeed. The nation will be inherited by her son, Prince Charles, and he knows that in time that will pass to his son, Prince William, and he knows that he will pass it to his son in turn. That gives an incentive to consider the long term, to not always chase short-term benefits at the expense of long-term stability. And I'll give you a really good example of this: architecture. As our societies have become less and less aristocratic and more elected, we have designed far less long-lasting architecture. The school I went to, perfect examples. We have the old building. It is still standing. It was, there was a memorial on the wall of people who walked in those same halls and sat in those same classrooms, who fought and died in the Great War and the Second World War. It is well over 100 years old. And then there's the new building, which was a prefab that was built within my lifetime and has already fallen apart and was completely decrepit. We have, near to where I live, there is Cessford Castle, a still largely intact building from the early modern period / late medieval period. You will find in parts of Britain architecture dating back to before any currently spoken languages, before anyone spoke Sanskrit or Hebrew or Mandarin or any language that is spoken today. There was Stonehenge. There is architecture that predates any spoken language, any currently spoken language in Britain. Why? Because older aristocratic societies built things to last. Modern elective societies very rarely do so because it is not an incentive for any politician to invest the additional funds in making something that is built to withstand time. And I think that is a good reason why a certain degree of hereditary power, a certain degree of aristocracy should be present in the design of a system. I don't think you should go all the way. You can go too far in that direction, but equally you can go too far in the other direction. We had the perfect example of this. We had a period of absolute tyranny in the United Kingdom when we stopped being a kingdom, when we had Cromwell, who was the first and to this point the last ever British head of state who was not a monarch, who did not claim his position through any kind of crown or birthright or marriage. That was the only time we were a republic, and it was by far and away the most brutal and repressive time in our nation's history. So the idea that an elected leader would protect freedom is, I think, an entirely unfounded idea. We see many of history's most extreme and brutal dictators, Hitler, Mao, Lenin, Stalin, Idi Amin, rose to power on a wave of populism. These systems of governance were often far harsher. And in fact, if you were to break down the various historical systems of governance, I think you would find, on the whole, monarchic systems have been more laissez-faire than not. The British Empire was sometimes called the night watchman state because it interfered in people's affairs to only the extent a night watchman did. Basically, don't go smashing windows, don't murder your neighbours, don't burn widows, don't trade in slaves, and we'll basically get along fine. It was a very libertarian for its time style of government. Compare that to its republican contemporaries, like the French Republic, which was vastly more repressive than the ancient regime it replaced ever was. Robespierre and Napoleon interfered in the everyday lives of citizens far more so than even the most draconian king in French history ever could have. I would argue that, historically speaking, monarchs have done a better job of protecting individual liberty than elected leaders have. So,
but for how long?
Well, and until they die, and then their eldest child takes over, or the circle of aristocrats, the patriarchs or matriarchs of the higher families, elect a replacement. So I don't think we should go all the way to having no elected positions, but I don't think we should go all the way in the other direction either. I think the compromise that we did have until Tony Blair's disastrous constitutional reforms in the UK was actually a pretty good compromise. We had the courts, which were a wholly independent body. We had the lower house of Parliament, which was elected, the House of Commons. We had the upper house of Parliament, which was a combination of life peers who'd been knighted by the Queen and hereditary peers who'd inherited their positions. We had the Prime Minister, who was appointed by the lower house, and we had the Queen, who inherited her position from the royal line. I think that was a sensible series of checks and balances on power. And I think Tony Blair fouled it all up with his constitutional reforms and how much he limited the House of Lords, and power just sort of slid into the House of Commons. Another case of that is the homosexual marriage debate, which, on the whole,
actually, let me interject right there. It took one person to fuck it up, is what you're saying?
Tony Blair, you've heard of Tony Blair?
Yeah,
yes?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. But you're telling me Tony
his constitutional reforms are the reason that this country is in a lot of the mess it is.
So it took one person, well, in whatever party.
It took the leader of
in the parliament,
a massive amount of political power at the time, and I really think we need to take a step back and remove most of his constitutional reforms, because they haven't succeeded in doing what they were supposed to do, and they have, I think, made things a lot worse.
Because that's why, like, to me, like, that's why I'm an anarchist, is because if you get one person in a party in charge, they can drastically change things for the worse. But I would be more about a small country, like, because America's fucking massive. It's like how big we are.
I agree. You guys need more. Yeah. You need more subsidiarity. There are way too many things that are decided at the federal level. You need to let the individual states, and in some cases the individual counties, do more. It's not practical to have to have every decision made more. High level decisions, sure, but things like the Bureau of Land Management is a perfect example. Remember those Oregon militia chaps?
Yes,
the Bundy Ranch.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I actually think a lot of their complaints were fairly sensible. They're saying the Bureau of Land Management has taken this state, the state of Oregon, into a condition that it was never constitutionally intended to be, where our state government has very little control over how the state is run, because so much of the land is federally managed. We believe, therefore, that is limiting our ability as citizens of a state who participate in state elections and state politics to actually exercise any control over our own state, because it's all decided at a federal level by the Bureau of Land Management, which I think is a very cogent and very reasonable complaint.
Yeah, we have a lot of three-letter agencies. Like a lot.
Yeah, what is that? Is there a budget thing where they get less money?
If you add extra letters, it's like it's millions of dollars. You keep printing it out on T-shirts and like coffee mugs to beat.
What was funny to me is when I first was like, "Oh yeah, it was like a BLM dispute with those dudes over in Oregon." I'm like, "What does Black Lives Matter have to do with this?" I didn't even know about the Bureau of Land Management. That's how much shit that gets ridiculous. It's basically just. The federal government here, just like, so like, yeah, we're gonna make another agency for this. Like, why? We just try. It's for the greater good.
I think it's the majority of land in Oregon is under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Land Management, which effectively means if you are an Oregonian citizen and you want to have some say in how land is managed, public land is managed, your votes have to compete with the votes of everyone in the country, including people who don't live in Oregon. So someone in Texas or someone in California or someone in Alaska who doesn't have that much of their state controlled by the Bureau of Land Management effectively gets to vote on how public land is managed in your state. You don't get to vote on how it's managed in theirs. I think it's totally reasonable for them to say the Bureau of Land Management needs to be scaled back. This land needs to be under the control of the
apparently 28% of the United States, the land, 28% of the land is owned by the federal government.
Which was, I do not believe, what your founders intended.
Oh no, it's not. Well, I mean, what could you know? Well, the thing with the founders is they believe, because the problem to me is that people believe a piece of paper was going to actually constrain the government, and there's other debates to be had that the Constitutional Convention wasn't.
I believe at the end of the Constitution there is an implicit open brackets or else close brackets.
Yeah, there is. There's an exit clause that some people try to do back. I don't know. There was like a civil war about it. I don't really know history.
There was a civil war. There was a witch rebellion like 2 minutes after the whole slavery thing. It wasn't where asking you.
I still haven't watched that one. I've watched The Winter Soldier. I've watched, I think, what was the one that came after that? I still haven't gotten around to watching Civil War. I need to watch that. I've got Disney Plus. I should watch it, but I've never got around to it.
You should. It's a lot about
history,
on American history.
I'm more of a DCEU guy myself, but no, I've got to get around to watching that at some point. It's ridiculous that I haven't.
So, have you seen the new Batman trailer with Robert Pattinson?
Oh yes,
that delicious twink. I haven't seen it.
I am interested to see how they end up doing.
Oh, did you? You just saw Venom, right? I mean, this is Marvel, but you just watched Venom, didn't you?
No. The film I recently watched was No Time to Die.
Oh yes.
The Bond film. Does he take his shirt off in that?
Are we okay with spoilers for No Time to Die?
Oh yeah, I don't care.
It's a James Bond movie. Go for it.
Spoiler alert! It's James.
Spoiler:
Bond,
does he take his shirt off in the movie?
Yeah, we do see him without a shirt, but I don't think we actually saw him take it off. I may be misremembering.
Okay, so he's shirtless at one point in the film.
Spoilers alert! He was actually a Time Lord the whole time.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. I didn't watch Doctor Who now.
Yeah. It's been too long since we've had some Doctor Who. We didn't get any of it last year, I think. The last series we got had very few episodes in it, and we haven't even had a Christmas. Well, we got those nice New Year episodes, which granted were nice, but I miss the Doctor Who Christmas specials. Can we have those back? It's been too long since we've had.
It's the UK. You absolutely can have your Christmas specials. You can even have more. It'll be coming up. Well, yeah. What else do we have? Quick thing. I wanted to circle. You do like Jen Psaki. I want to circle back around to something. Earlier, I guess I missed some of the chat stuff. Just a few. Animal rights. Do you believe that animals are on the same plane as humans?
Are we using plane in the
animals have the same rights as humans? Or if they should.
So. No, I don't think so. And I may be biased because I really, really like a gammon steak, but I know pigs are pretty clever, and it's a very hard line to thread, and that is one of the points at which voluntarist philosophy becomes quite challenging. How do we manage the obligations of rational actors towards non-rational actors? Are there any obligations at all? I think that is a very, very difficult question to answer. I mean, because you could argue that the most common behavior we have towards animals, which is eating them or breeding them for their bones, for glue, or their wool, for clothing, you could argue that is in and of itself the biggest possible violation. I mean, why is it that we are instinctively repulsed by the idea of someone walking up to a horse and punching it in the face, but we're not?
I'd punch a horse in the face.
Someone eating a cow.
I'd suck its dick.
Oh no, because the argument, like the anarcho-capitalist position for most people, except that one girl that keeps harassing me on Tumblr, is that because animals are property, right? Yeah. Because you own animals, like because if you break it down to like the dogs and cats, you buy the animals. They're your pets. You can do whatever you want with them because they're property. You recognize as property. And some people like to be like, well, no, they're not. Like your kids are property. I'm like, well, no, they're not. Even by common law legal systems, you're the guardian of the child. You are supposed to protect the child. That's what your job is. Children are not property. You are supposed to take care of them and raise them until they can take care of themselves, right? So there's people try to do these arguments. So we're like, well, you can't kill a cow, or have like the super hardcore vegans or something, because it'd be like, well, you wouldn't kill your kid. Like that's a false equivalency, because human beings have rights. They have agency. They are aware of their actions.
Marvin Gaye's dad, huh?
Marvin Gaye's dad?
Yeah, Marvin Gaye was shot in his sleep by his father.
Ooh, no, I don't know. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Surprise factoid, listeners.
I'm 23. How do you not know this?
By his father.
What?
He was shot in his sleep by his father. I'm 23. You have no excuse not to know this.
Because we're not gay.
Well,
that's true. Well, wait, hold on. Cybersmith, are you gay?
No.
Okay, yeah, it's only you.
Yep, just you.
It's not even gay. It's bisexual. It's whatever. It's fine.
fine. It's whatever.
God damn it.
So that was the thing.
Not
of the
all-wheel
animals.
drive. It's just four-wheel drive.
I'm just scared because we're going to go off because how long do you have tonight?
Theoretically, I have theoretically, I have about 6 hours and 11 minutes. In practice, I'm going to have to sleep before I need work. So let's say I've got another 2 hours or so.
Oh, okay, because I'm going to dip out of here in about 5 or 10 minutes. But like the extended show, Ben and Yimmer would love to talk with you some more. And probably more
Absolutely.
like off the cuff random bullshit. And maybe you know what you guys could. Well, they could drink some. Well, Yimmer's already fucking hammered. I'm looking at his face right now.
Can't feel
this
my...
dude's done. You look like such a bottom right now, bro. I'm just looking at you. And it's funny that Cybersmith's on top. This is going to work out very well for the writing. I'm just
Matt. When you
around.
leave, Yimmer is going to be in between the both of us on the bottom. So,
we're going to Paris. Is that what's happening?
oh god,
God damn it!
How far are you from Paris?
What?
Not you, Yimra. Cybersmith. How far is he from Paris?
Let's see. I'm in the south of Scotland, so I guess as the answer is always with any part of France, not far enough.
yeah.
Nice.
Oh wait, you guys need my Paris joke. Okay, all right. It's called an Eiffel Tower. It's when you
We
have
got
two
your
people
Paris joke,
and one
you
in between.
Otter.
Come on.
Okay, cool, Yimra, cool stuff. Yes. So, I don't know if there's any last thing. I guess the term limits I didn't ask you about. Are you in favor of term limits?
In some parts of government, yes. That's why I think it is this balance. You can't go all the way towards hereditary life appointments, and you can't go all the way towards term limits. Some positions should have term limits, some positions shouldn't. I think it's one thing for legislators to have term limits, certainly in the lower house of a bicameral legislature, but I think it becomes a problem if all positions have them.
Yeah, I'm not even, because my opinion on the term limits is that they're useless and ineffective coming from the American system, because term limits on presidents, right? It's like, oh yeah, we get a new guy every time, but the new guy repeats the same shit, basically, essentially the same shit as the last guy. So it's like, yeah, you have a new person in, but they're doing the same shit as the last guy, like Biden, for example. So like, oh, like, the stay in Mexico policy is racist or whatever. And then starting November, they're bringing it back, for example. So it's like, he's doing the same shit Trump did, but he's a senile old man with dementia, so it's okay. You know what I mean? So it's like, this is the same. Like, the joke I like to make is that George Bush never left office. There was term limits. George Bush is still in there. He just of a different mask. It went from...
Is also why the idea that democracy generally delivers the will of the people, we would have to accept that on certain issues, the will of the people has consistently been this one thing. I think that's why, to some extent, democracy is limited. There are some things that people want that no government can reliably deliver. So, war in Afghanistan. There has always been foreign involvement in Afghanistan. There always will be. At some point, you'll be back there. It was silly to pull out. You'll be back there eventually.
Oh no! My theory is the new
Someone
war,
will.
the new American war, America's new enemy. Well, everyone's new enemy is COVID. We're going to be at war with COVID for like 20 years. That's the new war for America, in my opinion. We might be back in Afghanistan. I mean, we're still in every other part of the region, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can't reliably. There is a reason that part of the world has been occupied or has had an attempt at occupation by some foreign power for basically as long as we have human records. There's geographical reasons, religious, cultural reasons. None of those reasons have gone away. You'll be back, or someone will be.
Yeah,
I think China is up next.
It's like saying we're going to put the issue of should water flow uphill or downhill on the ballot. Water is going to flow downhill no matter which way people vote. Afghanistan will be invaded no matter which way people vote. It is silly to put that issue to a referendum.
You know what's fun? I'm thinking about the history of Afghanistan, because there was some joke meme that someone put out where every country that had invaded Afghanistan, 2 years later they fell. And I was like, "Oh, please, baby, please."
Well, by that standards, no, that doesn't work. We invaded Afghanistan many times over the centuries. And strictly speaking, if that were true, you lot should have fallen before Bush's first term ended.
I would hope. I would hope.
if only. If only we're so lucky.
Balkanize.
All right, so that's where I'm going to dip out for the night. So, you guys can continue on, talk about whatever you want. It's a free for all.
Nice to meet you, Moonlit Alta.
Nice to finally speak with you. This has been very delightful, I have to say.
Indeed, it has.
So, all right, boys, you have a good night and continue a nice, good conversation. And Yimmer, just go off the rails. I'm giving you all authority to do so.
Rails. I mean, I can get some. I'll get some Yale. I got you.
All right. Good night, fellas.
I'll see the point where I cut myself shaving. Every time I try, I end up cutting myself shaving. There's no way around it, seemingly.
I cut myself shaving literally like not even an hour before this, and I don't even use like a normal straight razor. I just kind of get like a shitty buzzer and just kind of call it a day. Like I always cut this one same part of my neck every time. It's like one real hard hair there.
For me, it's all over. I've got a fairly deep one.
Oh yeah, and that's the worst.
I've got one of those stippling kits where you do that. It stings like heck, but it stops the bleeding. And I just look like I've gone one-on-one with Jason Voorhees or something like that. And it does not seem to matter what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried the old actual standard straight razor in the safety holder where you just bend one piece of metal that's blade on both sides. Bleeds. I've tried normal safety razors. I've tried the cheap ones, the expensive ones. Doomed to bleed. It's like I have selective haemophilia.
You ever consider like just letting everything grow out and then go to shave it?
Oh no, I like this style.
I know, but I'm saying you grow everything out, let it get nice and thick, and then like have it shaved nice and clean, have like the same stuff, and then avoid the cutting, and it looks nice and clean there.
Honestly, if I lived somewhere where it was more convenient, I might just say I'll save up and occasionally go get a barber to do it, but certainly that would make it all more symmetrical.
Still fronting a good look. I ain't much for the facial outside the mustache. I do it once in a while. I can't do that for too long. I just like I can talk to him in Spanish too much.
So I have a question for you. So has anybody in the real world ever come up to you and recognized you as the Cybersmith? Have you ever had a fan in real life approach you and talk about your posts?
Well, sort of. Back in university, but that was for something different. That was because people recognised me from some business cards that I'd put around. But not for stuff that's happened on Tumblr. No, I mean, there was. I guess you could argue that time I was arrested, but that was for something different.
You were arrested?
Yes, this was years ago.
Would you care to tell us about that?
I was going through quite a bad period of mental health. I hadn't been managing it as well as I should have. And I forgot to take my medication one day. It was the day of the terrorist attack on the bridge near Westminster.
Okay.
Back in, I think, 2017. And I uploaded a video. Shouldn't have done that. So stupid thing. Bad mental state. Exhausted. End of the day. Uploaded a video, and I was just ranting, screaming, demanding nuclear war, that sort of thing. And I didn't even remember doing most of that the next day. I thought, oh yeah, I uploaded a video. I'm not going to bother rewatching that or anything. And then a few months later, the police came me. So that's something of a wake up call. I needed to get a lot better at managing my mental health, but I managed to get past it. Served an unpaid work sentence at the Salvation Army. So I've moved past that point in my life. But yes, that was the video's long since been taken down. But that was that was a time when I was taking a year out of university, essentially getting ready to redo a year because my marks had fallen very badly due to mental health issues. So that does tie into what I was talking about earlier, how that can be problematic when going for a job. The fact that something you maybe did years ago when you were in a very heightened or extreme state of extreme mental state is something you will still have to explain and still be judged for years later. And I think that is potentially that is whether it's an issue or not will come down to personal judgment, but that is something we should be aware of.
Yeah, that's very true.
Mm-hmm. Although to be said though, felons are some of the hardest working people out there.
This is very true. Yeah.
That being said, they have a hard time finding jobs, especially even over here. One of my boys got out of jail during COVID. And he's finding work, just not legal work. That's the exact reason. He's such a scumbag.
Okay, so we have another question coming in from the audience. What is, outside of the whole human pet thing, what is one misconception people have about you that you would like to correct?
A lot of people seem to think that I left Tumblr or deactivated. I didn't. My first account was removed, and then my second account was shadow banned. And I've just managed to clear up the shadow. I didn't leave Tumblr because of the porn ban. I stayed on Tumblr. I just haven't really been able to communicate in it.
Mm-hmm. And it seems I follow you, and every once in a while I have to unfollow you because then the feed gets kind of logged up with your kind of stuff. You still find your content. God bless you, dude. That was a good deal.
Yeah, so for everybody watching, if you would like to follow the Cybersmith, I'm sure we can mention this now, and Matt will drop a link to your blog on whatever reblog we've got going on. But find that post. He should be tagged. If you'd like to follow him, he's still available.
I'm also on Twitter as the Cybersmith.twitter. Twitter.com/thecybersmith. So I think that's what you found there.
You got an Instagram as well?
I don't really go in for that.
That's fair.
I'm a big fan of Instagram.
I find it interesting. So earlier you said that you only have like a few followers on Tumblr and a few followers on Twitter. I find that very interesting given the, I don't know, the lore around you, surrounding you. Like, a lot of people know about you and know about your posts, and it was interesting, at least in the Tumblr community in the past couple of years, to see your activity on Twitter and to see your posts from Tumblr be posted on Twitter, and to see that kind of like, or Reddit, yeah, especially Reddit.
Yeah, it's all over Reddit too.
To kind of see that kind of lag as it's hitting the mainstream, and we're just like, oh boy,
I am actually quite prominent on Reddit, and I may be actually more popular on Reddit. I've done quite a few things for more installations, so I've done a few things on Reddit for various subreddits, but I may be more prominent on there than I am in the various other places. I'll just post that in the general. So if you guys want to use that, you can.
Most definitely, yeah.
So that's so I do a little posting on Reddit every now and again. I post the occasional essay or monograph there.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a position. You basically have a presence on Reddit. You have a presence on Twitter. You have a presence on Tumblr. Of all three of those platforms, which would you say is the most caustic or the most accosting to you as an internet presence?
Well, Tumblr is definitely the part where more people are disparaging, but that's rarely directed to me. It's just people making posts in which they say, "I don't like this person."
Okay, that's fair.
To some extent, that happens on Twitter as well, although it's mostly just people going, "Wait." It's mostly just screenshots of me that get posted, and then saying, "I saw this and that person." Reddit is actually surprisingly, although it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. I'll make a post on something entirely unrelated, and someone will say in the comments of that, "Wait, aren't you?" "Yes, I am. Can we get back on topic, please?"
I think I've seen a few of those screenshots floating around where you're engaged in conversation and something. It's like, wait, aren't you the human pet guy? And you're just like, yeah, all right, can we get back to the topic? Like, yes. Of all the weird shit on the internet, like, just accept that this is happening. Just move on.
Yeah, honestly, on the internet, that's kind of just like, whatever. At a certain point of the day, especially if you on Reddit, they should be kind of like, that should just be an accepted fact, whatever, who cares? Okay, anyways, because Reddit is like there's like 4chan, a fucking cesspool over there.
Oh, so...
Well, it's got its own subreddits for each individual concept.
Mm-hmm.
So, at least from what I browse on 4chan, and 4chan is my kind of poison of choice,
Oh,
the Cybersmith, at least on what I frequent, is not really mentioned a whole lot. I don't visit very many boards. It's possible there are boards where what he's posting.
I'm not really a 4chaner. I could never work out the format of all that stuff. So
That's fair.
I may or may not be. I really can't comment. I'm not a 4chaner.
At least from what I've seen, I haven't seen a whole lot of it. And I think it's because that like 4chan is such, compared to like Tumblr and Twitter, it's such a distinct community of people who really like, maybe they'll venture out into Tumblr a little bit, or Twitter a tiny bit, or like maybe Instagram a little bit. But 4chan is really like, the hardcore 4chan users really don't stray too far out of that, or like other obscure image boards like 8chan and all that other shit. So like, at least from what I've seen, it seems like for the most part you are rather mainstream. You're not, I mean, I don't know if arguably 4chan is and is not mainstream, but like,
yeah. Because that's why I don't regret the fact that I don't use Cybersmith on DeviantArt. I just keep that entire thing separate because I don't want to work on a story or work on some digital image that illustrates an aspect of the story, and then have them, oh, aren't you such and such in the comments? No, just not dealing with that.
That's very fair. Yimmer, you have any questions? Anything you want to ask?
Thoughts? We know you haven't seen the other episodes, so you don't have any thoughts on my twink harem. So we're gonna get that one out of the way. So I have a conceptualized ideal of once society collapses, I will have a harem, or pretty much after another girl breaks my heart for the 18th time this year, and or whatever, not year, 5 or so times now, where I basically just snap and say, fuck it, women out of here. And I will start a population bordering on a cult, basically. We're going to have a compound where there's going to be twinks protected by big muscular men called bears. And basically,
why do you have to wait for society to collapse in order for this to happen?
Because otherwise it's going to look like a cult, and I don't want the ATF to raid me because there'd probably be a lot of people in addition. Also, it looks kind of weird if there's just a guy who are mostly just having gays.
Think of the possibility if you were being raided by the ATF, and you got a sponsorship from Raid Shadow Legends or some such place, you could make a lot of money. A lot of people would tune in to see that.
All right. Okay. So we're actually getting some great alternatives to the twink harem. I was going to have a couple of celebrities over there.
So now I am imagining basically Waco, but live streamed and sponsored.
I'm gonna wear like a GoPro on like a tack helmet as I put one of those like fucking like juggernaut suits on with like an M240 Bravo to start like.
All right, sports fans, remember to like and subscribe.
Yeah. Sadly, Typhus would probably go pretty quick because you can only put so much ballistic armor in there before you just get weighed down.
We're going to demonstrate how to incapacitate an armored adversary using a rear naked choke. But first, a word from our sponsor.
You have elevated this concept in less than like 6 words. It's kind of amazing. This concept has gotten way funnier now than just my depraved reality of when I finally just give up on being around women.
Well, Yemra, I think if you're going to take anything away from this, it's don't let those dreams be dreams. You can have a twink harem right now.
That is very true.
What is the first step in a journey of 1,000 miles, but the largest step?
The first step is the largest step. Oh, man. Well,
ladies and gentlemen, the birth of the twink harem is now.
People are going to be upset. All those anonymous messages, they're all going to be so upset. They're gonna miss. I mean, to be fair, most of those anonymous messages are just like 3 dudes jacking off into a sock at 3 a.m.
All right, Mr. Cybersmith. Now, here's a topic that this is going to be just something that just popped into my head, but it's a pertinent topic, especially concerning a viewpoint from outside of the United States. Maybe, I don't know if you really are tapped into what like the zeitgeist is internationally, if it's different in the UK, but how does in the UK and then maybe outside of the UK, how do people perceive the US election in 2020? how do people perceive Biden, and how basically the state of the U.S. hegemony right now, how is that perceived internationally?
Well, there's a lot of varied decisions. You have to remember um, when people a lot of people think of the UK, they think of London.
Mm-hmm.
London is not the UK. London is London.
Mm-hmm.
So there were very varied decisions and perspectives um, the on that election. I think one of the major things that we saw was just we are baffled by why you guys have such long election cycles. Our elections don't run nearly that long. Um, you take more time voting for who's going to be the next dog catcher than we do on constitutional referendums. Um, which I do think you guys turn it into a sort of spectator sport, the electoral process, which is fun to watch, but I question if it's a good way to organize society.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that maybe our elections are kind of, in their own form, kind of like their own sort of industry? Like the reason they are so long and the reason they are so massive is because there's such a profit to be made purely from like the entertainment value.
That is part of it. You also have, and this is an issue that I think that there's some very short-sighted people in your country who want, oh, we want campaign finance reform, we want campaign finance reform. But are people not aware that the reason Citizens United exists is that Hillary Clinton tried to shut down one of her critics, and the reason she couldn't get away with it is that the Citizens United decision was made. Citizens United referred to a specific body that was criticizing Hillary Clinton, and she tried to get them shut down. And the reason you have your modern campaign finance laws is precisely the ruling that she couldn't do that. I see people like the Young Turks who, oh, I lost so much respect for the Young Turks during the Trump era. The point at which I finally just gave up and said I don't take these people seriously anymore was the hydroxychloroquine thing.
Mm-hmm.
At that
Yep.
point, I just said, no, I don't consider them to be engaging in serious journalism. This is just partisan hackery.
For
But
many of
they are
us,
constantly talking about we want to get rid of campaign finance or we want to get rid of Citizens United. That would make the situation so much worse.
so one thing I wanted to mention real quick was that in the U.S. we kind of have a similar. I feel like at least people in our political square, and Yimra, feel free to disagree with me if you'd like, but a lot of people basically saw Trump as there's really no simple way to put it, but it's like something that is still the establishment. It is still like obviously like you said about presidents is that they all continue the same status quo. However, there was something about Trump that was just
Absolutely.
very.
And yeah, that my personal reaction to him was, this because remember this was 2016. This was the year when I was going through probably the worst point of mental health that I'd ever been in my life. I
Mhm.
found Donald Trump's journey very inspirational. Everyone's saying, "No, you can't do this. No, there's not going to be a." Remember George Clooney just arrogantly going out, "Oh, there's not going to be a President Donald Trump. That's not going to happen." They just said, "No, no, I'm doing it. I'm going to be elected. I don't give a damn what any of you think." And he made it. And I found that was personally, whatever you think of the man's politics, you have to admire his willingness to just take on the impossible and win.
This is very true. But the one thing I guess I wanted to get at was that like what Trump did, what the thing really people like who do hold him to some high regard hold him to is the great, I guess, unmasking, you could say, where during the Obama administration and the Bush administration, there was this facade of just I don't know, just like this establishment facade where it was very straight face in business and you had like whatever was printed in the news, it was like, all right, well, this is definitely what's happening. And then with Trump, it just got so egregiously bad sometimes,
Yes,
the shit they were publishing. And it's just like, you can really believe what you want in regards to
yeah,
whether.
they lost the ability to hide it or at least to obscure it. But what they were fundamentally doing is what they had always done. So we remember Brett Kavanaugh, where they tried
Oh,
to
yes.
smear him as a rapist. They did the same thing to Clarence Thomas
Yes, they did.
a few decades prior. It just didn't become a major news item at the time. What Donald Trump did was he took away their ability through some strange alchemy of his charisma. He managed to take away their ability to hide what outrageous biased hacks they were.
That's
But
exactly it.
he did put them into. I've seen people talk about Trump derangement syndrome. No, this is what they were always like. He just took away their ability to hide it.
Hmm.
I mean, some people in the media, granted, they lost their minds, but the establishment didn't. They're exactly what they always were. The Illuminati didn't change, it just lost its ability to pretend it wasn't the Illuminati.
Hmm. So I have seen actual firsthand evidence of that, and I'm going to throw this back to 4chan real quick. I occasionally browse a few different boards. I do browse Poll. I don't really post on Poll because it's very toxic. One other one I browse is basically 4chan's attempt at a work-safe news board, which is called News. And if you browse this board frequently enough, you will notice that they basically act as if Donald Trump is A, still in office, and B, still like the greatest threat to freedom since Osama bin Laden. And it's interesting to see the effect he's had on people because, like, we are. I don't know how many months we're into the Biden administration now. Like, I'm a little.
Several.
Some
I'm a little
people are still on the 6th of January. Some people just never
exactly,
move past that day.
exactly. And it's like.
I will amend my previous statement. There are some cases of genuine Trump derangement syndrome. Keith Olbermann, I think,
Oh boy, yeah.
if you
Oh
CAT
man.
scan, if you gave that man an MRI scan before and after Trump, you would genuinely notice something different about his brain. Something bad happened to that man, and I hope he gets help.
It was like basically you kind of see the same effect now with COVID, where like COVID has become sort of a religion where, you know, like if you're doing everything right, if you're tithing and praying, like God is not going to strike you down with COVID. In this case, tithing and praying is taking the vaccine and wearing the mask and all this shit. But with Trump, it was entirely different. It was like the more you were outwardly outspoken against Trump and the more shit you talked about him, it was like the more you were in the circle.
The position on the vaccine has been kind of weird. Remember when Donald Trump was talking about the vaccine, and when he was promoting it, that was the only time I've ever seen when, okay, not the crystal healing, weird bell bottom, sexy lunatic MILF leftists, but the other leftists, the house trained leftists. That's the only time I've ever seen the leftists be anti-vax.
That
Was when
house.
Donald Trump was.
Oh yeah, that was a nice little period.
Anyway, I've had both shots. My arm hurt a bit on the days, but after that, and I got really, really sleepy after the second one.
Mm-hmm.
I just collapsed my way through. Just slept my way through that half a day of work on that. Otherwise, fine. Otherwise, was really was really fine. But I do believe it's an individual's choice to
Most
take
definitely.
it or not.
I have had very
That's
different.
the only time, the only time I've ever seen leftists be anti-vax, other than the usual suspects. Yeah, outside of the kinds of people who take horoscopes seriously, that's the only time I've seen leftists be anti-vax.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't recall this, but like it's kind of become a little bit of a game now to go back and to find people's posts back when Trump was announcing the vaccine about how they would never take a Trump vaccine and it was no way, and like the FDA was working for Russia and all of this shit. And not even 6 months later, it's a complete reversal. And yeah, it's insane.
Remember the kids in cages. Even
Oh
over in the
boy.
UK, we were still hearing about kids in cages.
And you guys don't hear about that now.
No,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anything has changed, but suddenly
No.
it's not an
Oh,
issue.
no. You see, two things changed. One, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez moved from photo shoots there to photo shoots at Met Gala. And B, they're not kids in cages anymore. They are detention centers.
Didn't Joe Biden propose a plan to move some of them to Guantanamo Bay? And I just thought, any leftist who doesn't completely lose their minds about this has no moral credibility. Because you were... if you were a leftist during the Bush administration and you are currently calling for Joe Biden to resign for suggesting that, I don't believe you believe anything. I don't believe you have any principles if that's your position.
Well, it's a joke I like to make. I've made this on Tumblr before. It's a post you may have seen. It's called TV Says. And while a lot of these
I've
people...
not seen it, but I'll look for it.
It's basically, well, a lot of these people don't necessarily like watch like cable TV. They watch news that is primarily crafted and designed to be broadcast on cable news. Even if it is like a video on the internet, you're visiting a webpage, something like that, the format is a cable news TV format. And these people just tune into this, and that is their reality check. Like, they think that like them coming home or like coming to sort of like a basis and an understanding of how the world is working right now and what they need to be worried about is they turn on CNN or Fox or MSNBC. Usually it's on cable news because it's boomers doing this. And I made this specific joke because my beloved mother and my beloved stepfather, peace be upon him, used to watch like CNN and MSNBC in the kitchen, in the living room, and there was like a second time delay and they had the volume at max, so with like this horrible fucking echo of Wolf Blitzer going through my parents' house. And the joke I made at the time was TV Says, and it was these horribly conflicting viewpoints, but because they were seeing it on the TV, they didn't question it. It was what the truth of the matter was, and these were the facts. And all they had to do, maybe they would like research Snopes a little bit. But other than that, all they used to do was just watch the TV, and they believed they had an understanding of the world. And I believe that a lot of people look for some sort of authority figure, like a cable TV newscaster, to kind of like calm them down and assure them that they're not walking into the proverbial slaughterhouse as it was. And I kind of lost where I was going with that.
Yeah. Well, that mindset works right up until there's a captive bolt gun pressed against your head.
Exactly, yes. But, I mean, even in those moments, I mean, think about it like this, what we're having with the vaccine. I have had lots of stories of people who have taken the vaccine, like what you said, maybe they had a little discomfort at the time, and maybe they were a little sleepy. Maybe they had some sort of like moderate reaction. They felt like they had a cold for a day or two or something like that.
Because what you're essentially being injected with a weakened form of whatever pathogen. It is a weakened and hopefully non-reproductive form. So the general test for safety of a vaccine is not this won't give you symptoms. It's this can't be spread to another person. So it's a non-reproductive form of the pathogen, and hopefully a weakened form, but it is still a form of the pathogen. If it weren't, it wouldn't do anything because your body wouldn't respond to the antigens that it was.
And it gives you a higher viral load than what you'd say from getting actually sick, or at least from whoever gives it to you. You're supposed to theoretically build a much better immunity to that comparatively.
Essentially, the best protection a vaccine can give you, at the absolute best, the same level of protection that you would have by getting the disease and surviving it. Hopefully it does that with fewer symptoms and no chance of transmission. That's how a vaccine works. And we know they work. That's why we don't have polio anymore. It's why we aren't passing hundreds of people dead from smallpox everywhere we look. So we know they work, but we also know how they work and what they do. They aren't completely consequence-free, and there are people who can die from taking them, because if you are, for example, if you're completely immunocompromised by something like radiation, if you've been so heavily irradiated that your body just isn't producing white blood cells anymore, a vaccine will do nothing to help you. It's not a magic cure. It's exposing your body to the pathogen, hopefully so you can build antigens. You still need a functioning immune system for it to work.
Exactly. So I guess in regards to this particular vaccine, what has got so many people on the edge is that all anybody really hears about right now are the different types of serious reactions that people are having to this. And again, I am not going to be able to go through and provide a link for every single thing I am about to say. Yeah. This is all like, you need to go Google this, and I'm not saying you guys specifically, I mean just in general. Yeah. If what I'm saying has any bearing, you will be able to find this.
Yeah, and the
So
worst thing the government can do is pretend that those aren't happening. We know they happen. There will always be some section of people who respond badly to a vaccine.
exactly,
But it's the
exactly.
same principle as there will always be some section of people who crash their cars during a driving test. That
So
doesn't
real
mean that
quick,
driving tests are bad.
I have a question for you based on like I don't know how much media you consume, be it cable or anything, in Scotland in your portion of the UK. Do they have actual advertisements for, say, the COVID vaccine? And if so, are they required to list the side effects of the vaccine when they're having these advertisements?
I really don't. I don't watch enough to know that. The BBC, which is the biggest news, is just has revealed itself to be wholly biased. But that's not a commercial system.
This is true, yes.
That's a sort of not quite taxpayer funded. But if you want to watch any television, you have to pay for the BBC. The BBC is the bare minimum of what you get. So basically, you could buy the package that gets you Sky. You could buy the package that gets you Dave. You could buy National Geographic. You could buy the porn channels. You can buy all the packages for all the various channels on your television. The one you have to buy in order to get any of the others is the television license, and that gives you the BBC.
Oh, okay.
So it's not quite a tax, and it's not quite a monopoly either. It's a very peculiar system of government enforced standards where basically, imagine if in order to drink any coffee, you had to get a membership card at Starbucks. Imagine if
Yeah.
yeah, imagine if you want to buy any kind of potato-based snack, you have to buy a tin of Pringles first.
Okay, I
That's
gotcha.
what it is. You cannot participate in that aspect of the market until you've bought this product. It's not quite taxpayer funded, and it's not quite a monopoly.
It's just yeah. So I get that.
It's on the precipice of both.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a
Okay, the
little bit in
vaccine
the
does
middle
not make
there.
your Pushkadel bigger, so
Yeah,
I'll never get it.
So
So
theoretically, you could choose not to, and plenty of people do choose not to. I don't pay a license fee, but then I don't. That means get to I don't get to use any of the television systems. And of course, theoretically, there are competitors as well, but you can't access the competitors until you've bought them. So they are in no danger of ever not being funded.
okay. So what I just
But
want to
I
take
won't
this
even
back.
consider giving them any more money until Doctor Who comes back.
That's totally fair.
Fair enough.
What I want to throw this back to real quick about vaccines in the U.S. when it comes to like pharmaceuticals being advertised in the U.S. is, and this is kind of a running joke in American culture, where when you have an advertisement for a drug, say Zoloft or like Benadryl or something
Vyzan.
like Claritin, Vyzan, something like that, Viagra.
Benadryl.
At the very end of this
Viagra.
commercial, there is going to
It
be
has to
usually
list.
it has to list the side
It's
effects.
like half the ad is just side effects, and some of them are
Yep.
side effects that happen to like one person. Totally
Exactly.
unrelated to. That's
What you don't
One
have right
person was
now.
hit by a meteor, and we think that might be associated with these
there's a
aspirin.
chance. There's a 30% chance. We
So
gotta put it
even
in
though you have in the U.S. FDA approval, which I'm gonna throw up a little quote sign right there because it's approval under the EUA. Even though you have this approval, you don't see advertisements directly advertising the vaccine. You have celebrities going on and saying, "Oh yeah, I got the vax. You should get the vax too." The reason they're doing that is because they don't have to talk about a lot of the side effects that people are having with the vaccine.
Because endorsements are not regulated to the same extent that advertisements are.
This is
That's
exactly it.
that's a clever loophole. It's evil, but it's clever.
Exactly. So when you have one thing like that, I can understand how a lot of people might go, "Oh, it's just this one thing. It is a loophole, but it's like the only loophole."
Also,
You see this.
like we've thought of it. There is actually a parallel to how the BBC works. The BBC works the same way mandatory vaccination works. It's sort of. You have to get this one product made by this one company, or two companies, I guess, and AstraZeneca and Pfizer. You have to get this if you want to participate in any market at all. That's fairly massive cronyism, and I would be interested to see how many of the legislatures in the House of Representatives and the Senate in the USA are invested in the stock of AstraZeneca and Pfizer.
Oh, so that is also a running joke. So not only has Pfizer posted like record profits this year, it's now a running joke, especially with Nancy Pelosi, that anytime there is a major legislative decision, there are moves made in the stock market by members of the U.S. Congress that reflect that. So if they're going to crack down on something and a particular company is going to take a hit, you can bet these senators are all going to short this company, or they're going to short this particular stock. They're going to short
they're excluded
crypto,
from insider
like
trading.
Exactly.
Actually,
they're the only entity in the U.S. that is excused.
Is allowed to engage in insider trading.
So you can imagine how much money they are
do.
currently making, especially in their Pfizer stock, with any sort of legislation. Not that there really is legislation being passed, because I'm sure you guys have heard about the vaccine mandate that Biden has put out, talking about OSHA and all this shit. I'm sure you guys have heard about that over in Scotland and the UK in general, correct?
Yes. America is a major cultural force, so yes.
Okay, yes. So what a lot of people don't know about this is that all there has really been in regards to this is a press release. That's it. So far, OSHA as a body has not taken major steps going forward in order to implement any sort of vaccination mandate on private businesses who have employees over 100 people. This, so far, it doesn't actually exist, but what you are seeing is a lot of private companies on their own regard using nothing but this press announcement to pressure their employees into getting this vaccine mandate, or basically having your job terminated, or in some cases of airlines, being forced to pay for testing, or being forced to pay out of your paycheck, like something into some sort of medical insurance clause because you're a risk or something like that. And
how convenient for the people manufacturing the vaccines.
Exactly. So, but another thing my mind keeps going to is, after 4 years of constantly hearing about people crying about fascism under Trump, and you can make this about a lot of claims involving the federal government especially, which I'm not saying does not practice inherent things about this, what we are seeing right now, where the government puts out a presser saying that this is going to be a thing, and private companies, without any actual federal enforcement, without any actual legal mandate, are doing this at the behest of government, it fits a very, very, very basic textbook definition of fascism. And it's very hard. I don't see how anybody can just look at that and just not go, oh, okay, that's worrisome. Like, a lot of people are just like, yeah, sure, fuck it, let's segregate society, do it. Unfortunately, my family is a lot of these people, so it's interesting, but it's like, I guess I'm just looking for your perspective on that, because for me especially, for a lot of us in the anarcho-capitalist pod, as you will, that's something, watching that, it's very concerning, and a lot of us are just kind of like, well, we're gonna ride this out and do what we can, but shit. So,
I mean,
yeah.
what you really have to hope for is that you get Donald Trump back in 2024, because, given this credit, we were talking earlier about how the Bush administration never. Donald Trump did not go full authoritarian with this. He did not use this as an excuse to increase his own power.
This is true.
Which I think is actually quite distinctive for a leader. It's not quite on the level of Cincinnatus or George Washington. But it is notable how easily he could have seized power, and we can see it because of what Joe Biden did.
I do want to say real quick that while Trump is arguably pretty good on that, the executive branch as a whole, as it has done with most administrations, like especially recently, has
the deep state that does what it wants.
It has expanded, and it has gained power, and like there are several moments with Trump that need to be called out involving a possible expansion of federal power. I think one of the most prominent ones would be after the Las Vegas shooting, where he was talking about going after bump stocks and going after silencers and all of this shit. Where
that's an issue where you have to say he's wrong about that. And didn't the guy who was that? There's the fire pattern wasn't consistent with a bump. He would have had to have
it was easily a fully automatic
to have done that.
Oh yeah, so
your fingers. I mean, forget about it. You'd be ripping clitorises off for a living.
So there are a lot of interesting
things. You have to be one of those
things.
Smash Bros champions to do that.
They got a Smash player to go out there.
There are a lot of interesting things about the Las Vegas shooting, which considering you are a very well-read person, which I will say I did not expect you to be as well-read and eloquent as you are. So that's very cool. So one of the things I do want to mention about the Las Vegas shooting, though, is that there are a lot of theories as to why basically he was there and why there was this whole stash of weapons and all of this shit. And at least in my opinion, one of the theories I have put together was that he was there basically selling weapons to another party. Because if you look at a lot of the crime scene photos from the scene, a lot of these guns are kind of displayed on the bed, like they're like lined around the edge, and like he has to get all this shit into the room by himself, which there's this whole thing with the security guard in the hotel that like vanished, and supposedly he came back, but it looked completely different, and there was this whole body double theory.
Yeah.
But
I've heard claims that he may have been an intelligence asset who was essentially there to frame some other party,
exactly,
and it may have been exactly the same. He was going to sell weapons to some group of extremists, and this was essentially entrapment or
like a sting
operation. It was a sting operation by a group of people who a lot of people believe were there to attempt to assassinate a Saudi royal who was in the hotel at the same time gambling with his private security. And there are a lot of people who were in the hotel at the time.
You're allowed to gamble with private security? How does that work? You lose at the roulette, and you say, "Okay, I'm in, and if I win, I get my money back. If you win, you get my private security."
No. This is the Las Vegas is host to a lot of people who are foreign dignitaries who basically just have a shitload of money. And there are Saudi royals and people from like the UAE and Dubai and all of this shit who come to Vegas, and it's like it's ball out season. These hotels live and die by these whales essentially. So this Saudi royal was gambling in the hotel. Okay. All right, sorry, I'm a little sloshed, so it took me a second to get the joke there. Yes, gambling with his private security there. They remember seeing his private. Oh, jeez. They remember seeing his private security there, leading him out while this gunfire was going on that a lot of people on the scene believed was automatic fire and not the same kind of rate you can have with a bump stock. Yes. So the theory is that this dude, Paddock, I think was his last name, was there as a CIA asset, and it's believed that the CIA has assets who use gambling as a way to launder money, either for CIA operations or for their own personal use, was there attempting to entrap this party of individuals who had made plans to assassinate this Saudi royal, and when shit had gone wrong, they staged the shooting on the concert in order to basically cover up what was going on.
They worked out he was CIA. They tried to leave, and as they left, he shot at them from the window. And then, in order to cover the whole thing up, he then pretended to be a mass shooter and killed himself.
So not him. The group that was attempting to buy the weapons killed him, and then an attempt to pin the entire thing on him. And I don't necessarily know if they knew he was CIA, if they just thought he was just somebody in general. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they just killed him because he was a loose end. But the idea was that when they lost the Saudi royal, the other part of the reason they fired on the crowd was to basically cover up what had been going on.
Otherwise, people would wonder why they had been there.
Exactly,
and why there were all these weapons. They couldn't carry all the weapons out with them, so they needed an excuse for them being there.
Exactly.
And then, weirdly, his brother said, "This doesn't match the man I knew," and then his brother was found committing crimes with some ancient Stone Age computer.
Yeah, like a 98 like Windows XP.
Windows fucking XP
with like
30 terabytes of child porn. Yeah, exactly.
Which was like 1 or 2 generations removed from the Babbage difference engine. And I just think that seems a little funny. That seems a little questionable.
It should be also mentioned that Paddock's house, so not his brother, his house, while it was under lock and key by federal and local agents being under investigation for the shooting, somebody broke into it and stole some shit, and nobody knows what it was, and nobody knows who
all
did
the weapons
it,
were taken. All the evidence of the weapons were all like melted down, basically.
Pretty much, or there
And
was
also
maybe
there's been
some
no
hard
motive
drives.
ever for one of the
Oh yeah,
biggest
no
mass shootings in
motive.
history.
There was some like vague thing. He was like, "Oh, he was Antifa," and there was like, "Oh no, he
Or,
wasn't."
or
Antifa,
no,
he
there was the
a
one where
right-winger.
he was in debt over something or some
Yeah,
shit like
exactly.
that.
But nobody actually knows, and we just don't talk about it anymore because TV
Yeah,
says.
the FBI, which is supposed to be like one of the best investigative agencies in the world, arguably, at least as far as general opinion of how those agencies work, outside of our opinion, and they don't have a motive for this.
Putting a medal around his own neck, isn't it?
A little
The
bit, yeah.
FBI, we're the best. We're the best investigative organization.
Yeah, we developed a tool that makes it look like you shot yourself. It's like that one scene in The Shooter. If you guys seen that movie with Mark Wahlberg, that fucking device.
Decent. The suicide rig, yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, to be fair, I'm sure
that
in reality it's probably not that ridiculous looking because you'd
We-
probably have
we
so many
know that
wear
there
marks on
are-
your body.
Yeah, or they just go full Lelouch v Britannia and just say, they convince him to kill himself, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we do know that the people that these intelligence agencies, they are building weapons. Look at all the insane shit the CIA got up to in the MK Ultra project, and look at what now communist countries are doing. They've developed a kind of directed energy weapon that causes concussions, Havana syndrome. We know that there are communists.
I am not exactly certain that is real.
Who can cause concussions. Well,
I mean, there are certain devices similar to that already exist.
Okay, so I believe there are some sort of
electrical.
Okay, so I do believe that there is the technology possible to cause that sort of thing. I think some reports of Havana syndrome are just like politicians or dignitaries blaming the fucking hangover they got from taking adrenochrome and fucking kids and drinking and doing coke all fucking night long. And they're just blaming their hangover on Havana syndrome. I think maybe there have actually been cases where people have suffered like long-term like actual like memory lapses and like cognitive issues. But the most recent case, we're like, oh, yeah, we had Havana syndrome because we had to all drink red Gatorade till 1 PM and we wore sunglasses and we didn't want loud noises. So, yeah, oh, shit. But, yes.
That being said, there is tech that does exist similar. I mean, you find the examples like on certain battleships that post Somalia or even private entities with a big cargo containers. There's this large device. It basically just sends a sound wave that's very fucking aggravatingly painful. And usually it's a non-violent approach to pretty much say, hey, fuck off, devices. Go the other way, and Muslim will take the hint usually. Not always.
Okay.
I think they have them. They also used for riot control as well. You can look that up. I can't know what the name is, but they're on like APCs in some cases.
I know what you're talking about. It's like a dish they point at people, and it either does sound waves or it makes them feel extremely hot, like they're on fire, but they're not, and there's no actual physical damage. Yeah. Well,
anyway, I'm going to have to go quite soonish if I want to get a reasonable amount of sleep before work. But, is there anything you want to do before we wrap up?
Yimra, do you have anything you want to ask? Anything else you want to talk about?
I already got my twink harem bit out of the way, and you gave me a Raid Shadows Legend plug for that. So I mean, I'm set. Yeah. Good.
Splendid talking to you guys.
It was very nice talking to you.
Have a lovely evening.
You too, my friend. So we're going to do the outro real quick, and this will be a couple seconds.
Don't forget to add that outtake.
Of course, yes. So Matt is the video editing king here, so he's going to put that in later. Y'all should tune in for the outtake. It was excellent, especially if your name is Charles. There's a very important message for you in that outtake. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this very special episode. And as always, taxation is theft.